Hey guys, Fishmonger here. You know, it's a crazy world we live in right now with this whole coronavirus thing going on. I've been the fishmonger. I've been doing a lot of videos about a lot of World of Warcraft fishing stuff, and then back in the day, crypto mining stuff. But nowadays, I think I'm gonna have to temporarily rename myself from fishmonger to quarantine monger, mainly because, man, we're in quarantine, and what the hell are you gonna do in quarantine? Well, hang on, this is gonna get old.
So one of the things I've been keeping myself busy with in the beautiful summer months that have been coming up, obviously, is keeping up my motorcycle. And this video today is pretty much going to be about the gearing change that I've done on my Vstar 250 that you can see in the background right now. So one of the reasons I decided to swap the gears around on my Vstar is that the 250 it's a nice little bike. I've ridden a lot of bikes before, like all the way up to an 1100, and you know, every bike has its time and place, and I like 250s. I'm a short little guy, so it works fine for me. But the fifth gear on that thing, I'd be hitting fifth gear like 35 miles an hour, and you know, I shouldn't be shifting into fifth at 35, because then at that point, like doing 55 or 60, I am really hitting some high revs, and I didn't like that. So I did some research and basically was inspired by a couple of different people. There's a gentleman online on YouTube, does a lot of videos that are really helpful for the Virago. His name is IRideTas. He's a moto vlogger from Tasmania, Australia, and he's got this budget bobber build that he has working on. And as you can see here, he's got a 17:40 gear ratio swap, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing, except he had the benefit of having a motorcycle stand. And I don't have a motorcycle stand, and I would imagine most people don't have a motorcycle stand. So what I'm going to show you today is how to swap the gearing and the tire and the chain and all that stuff on the bike without a motorcycle stand. So one of the other places, I'm going to have links to all this stuff down below, but one of the other places I did find a lot of information from was his website, Virago 250 Street. Gentleman did a write-up on this way back in 2011. A whole bunch of information where he talked about a lot of the information here that I'm not even going to really go over, because you can just kind of read through it if you're interested in doing this swap. Really good. One of the things I do want to point out, though, is I did change my chain. It's a 112 link chain is the one I got. And basically when I chose 1740 with the 112 link chain, it was because of this right here, where he says the chain will fit perfect. I liked the sound of that. I wanted a chain fitting perfect with the perfect amount of adjustment forward and back if I absolutely needed it. And I wanted to swap my chain over anyway, so it was fine. The standard link chain is 114, so if you don't want to change the chain, but you just want to change the sprockets, you can use this information to kind of figure out what kind of gearing you want to use with the stock chain. So it's a really good website, and I really do appreciate the write-up this gentleman did. So, off to the races. This is going to be a slideshow, only because I didn't want to make a video as I was doing this. It's going to be a pain in the butt to have to edit, but at the same time, picture does speak 1,000 words, and I can get everything done with a photo the same way I'd be able to do it with a video. So this is the bike that we're going to be swapping the gearing around. It's a Vstar 250. This is a 2018 model. It's also known as the Virago. They changed the name around. I ended up picking up this 40-tooth rear sprocket from Sunstar. It was like 32 bucks from Amazon, so I got that shipped in, and it was timely shipping, and the quality seems to be really good. So so far it's been holding up nice. And then the front sprocket I got was this 17-tooth sprocket, also from Sunstar. It was only about 17 bucks. So this actually wasn't that bad either. So all in all, it wasn't a very expensive swap. I'm going to sneak this in post-production. The chain I got, which I totally forgot to mention, was a Primary Drive brand chain. It was a 520 size ORM O-ring chain. It was their partner PD0520-112. Pretty much any 520 chain will work. That's 112 links. And it's basically you don't have to do the O-ring, but like I said, I wanted to get the O-ring chain just for the better dirt resistance and all that kind of crap. So from what I hear, they're better. So I figured, what the hell, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it right. I did pick up a little phone holder at the same exact time. It's not necessary to change the phone holder, but this phone holder looks pretty good on the bike. So I just wanted to kind of make note of that. As you can see, that's actually the phone holder on the bike. Another little shot of the phone holder with the phone in the bike. Yet another shot of the phone. I'm going to just swing past these because they're not really that important. So this is a quick little list basically showing all of the stuff that I put into the bike here, and basically everything I needed for this. What I'm going to do is basically, I'm going to leave this up on the screen. You could pause this real quick right here if you want to go through this list, because otherwise I'm just going to skip right past this. So one of the things I don't like about this particular bike, the 250, and maybe it's other ones, I don't really know, but when you put this thing up on the side stand, man, it kicks over a lot. Like, it leans over a lot more than it really should. So whenever I park this thing in the garage, I always prop it up like about an inch and a half, and I just have a couple pieces of wood here that you can see that I do that with. And it made working on the bike a lot easier too. So you know, if you're gonna do this, I suggest you get something like this, or even just get a longer kickstand for it or something. Because I don't know why they designed it so it leans over like so freaking much. I mean, I get it, it's a beginner bike, and they want to make it like kind of easy for people to get on and off, but like it just leans over way too much. So the front piece we're going to take off here, we need a 5mm hex and a 10mm socket or wrench. You can see they're color-coded for what you need to put the things into. Using that 10mm, we're basically going to loosen up that one piece and pop off the shifter little doohickey thingy here. I don't really know a lot of the specific names for things, so I'm going to call it things like shifter doohickey. I had a lot of problem actually getting mine off. This little area in here, it was just really, really tight. It would not want to pop off, so I had to actually jam a flathead down in there and kind of pry this thing open to get it so it would actually slide forward, because the thing was just locked in place. I did a little bit of damage on it, but it's not really something that you're going to see or whatever, so I really didn't care. But if this is tight, like if you can't pull it forward tight, you're going to have to jam something down in there and kind of get it out, or get some kind of like grease in there or something to loosen that thing up, because I don't know, man, mine was just tight. So this is the whole side cover off here, so you can see the little bolts where they go and where they kind of pull them out. And there's the little wrench I used to take it off. You're going to want to remove this this chain guard here also. So basically it's a 5mm hex on these three bolts, and that's it removed. It looks so pretty. Now, when you get to the back, basically there's two nuts in the back, and it's a 12mm wrench, and honestly I just recommend using two of them, because when you're tightening these up, you're going to want to have two wrenches. It's a lot easier. This big socket here is a 22mm, and then this little guy here on the back shock is a 10mm. I personally loosened these all up right now. It's a lot easier to do this while it's still on the side stand and the bike is pretty much secure. I'm not saying like take everything off, but just kind of get everything loose. You don't need it. The bike's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to fall over, but when it's up on stands and stuff, you don't want to be jamming it and loosening it up. It's the same with a car. You want to take the tires off a car, loosen the lugs off first, just get them, you know, just not super tight, and then you can jack the thing up. So on the right side here, basically it's a 12mm also for these two back nuts. You can use nature's wrench here. Basically, that's your finger and your thumb. Just unscrew this guy. This is a 14mm on the outside, a 12mm on the inside. So to get this loosened up, and then basically this is a 19mm socket on the right side here. Now, if you notice, right now, see how far back this is? Because see, you can see in this picture too how far back this is. I swapped these the sockets over already. So this is already the 40 tooth on the back and the 17 tooth in the front. And when I did this, I could slide this all the way back, but man, there was a little bit too much slack in that chain, and I did not like how this is all the way back, which is why I'm doing the chain swap on this today. So here's the two jacks I used. Basically, pulled them out of the trunks of cars. Most cars have jacks, and most people own more than one car or have access to more than one jack. So this is an easy way to basically get your motorcycle worked on, take the tire off, without having to get a special motorcycle jack. A nice little clean work environment is very important because you don't want things sliding around on you. I have a very flat, slippery concrete floor, so I made sure to get this all cleaned up. This rear shock is going to be in the way. We're not going to be able to take this chain off with this rear shock in the way, so we're going to want to take this off. And the problem is, it's under pressure, and unless you have like somebody to hold the freaking back of the bike up to get the pressure off, it's gonna be a pain in the butt to have to take this thing off because it's basically got a load on it. So what I do, which actually works out pretty good, is I'm going to use one jack here on the side underneath to kind of hold the back swing arm here. So the other jack I actually have underneath the bike, okay, and it's really hard to see here, but basically the swing arm and the pivot is behind here. It's actually here. So the part I'm jacking up and lifting up is actually the main part of the bike, which is the frame. Because what's happening is as I'm lifting this up, I'm releasing pressure on the back because I'm jacking this up in front of where the pivot is for the swing arm. So it's, if you have the one jack on the left side, and then this jack being on the right side, as long as you're jacking them up in, equal amounts and you're kind of watching the balance of the bike, you'll be fine. Where this one is here on the front there, and then basically where this one is in the back, I've got it set up. I was actually able to lift this thing up, and when you jack this thing up enough, it actually takes the whole front part of the bike here, right here. It lifts this up, and basically it relieves the pressure, so you can just easily slide this spring off, which I was able to do right there. As you can see, the whole thing is right off, slid right off. And then basically this is what the side of the bike looks like now. I still got the jack up in there, and then the jack in the back. And then you can see the amount of slack I got on this chain. It wasn't happy. I had it on and I was riding around. It was like way too much. Actually, it looks worse here than it did before because this actually came forward a little bit. But it was too sloppy. I should not be riding like that. I only had it on for like a day before I got the other chain in and everything. But so this is where we're at right now. This is what our bike looks like. This is the stock Sprocket. It was a 15 tooth, I want to say. I'm not really sure. And as you can see, the way it's set up is it's got this little pattern kind of thing here. It looks like some kind of like Star Wars Rebel kind of pattern or something. And it's got the two pieces here. And then the replacement one I've got actually has a third hole here, okay? And it doesn't matter because you only need the two for the one that we've got here. So the reason I wrote this is I actually forgot what the hell freaking socket size I needed for this to take this off. And then I realized, and the next photo was actually the 10 millimeter because I took a picture of myself using the 10 millimeter. So yeah. So anyway, so we're going to loosen those screws up. We're going to pop that thing off, take this little piece off right here. And this is, just kind of strange. Just want to let you know, when you're putting this front sprocket on, it's supposed to be a little bit sloppy. It has a little bit of play. And basically it moves this like forward and back a little bit because this piece actually sits in, there's like a groove in there. It sits in the groove and it spins over at like, 20 degrees or whatever to line up with these holes. So these pieces here, they slide over the front and then they sit in this groove. They don't actually slide all the way tight against that. When I first got this thing and I was looking at it, I'm like, why the hell is this not lining up? And I realized it's because it's actually not meant to line up. This is just meant to kind of sit in the groove here, be tight up against this, but then basically hold this so it doesn't pop forward. But at the same time, you want a little bit of play. So anyway, I got this off. I slid this whole thing forward, right? And now I got this loose chain, which is great. But the way this is set up, and I've got this freaking jack in the way, I can't get this chain off. So all you got to really do, pop the jack out of the way, and then you can slide the chain right off. Now, what you probably didn't see me do here is I loosened up some of the jack up in the front and everything, and so I made it so obviously my bike is balanced before I did all this, but when you take this jack out of the way, you can actually take this chain and just slide this chain like right over the back, and it goes right around. You have to kind of make it a little bit of a bend to kind of get it to go over this. And you're fine. Some people have chains where, they actually have the master links on them and everything. This is the stock chain, so it's one big chain. So I actually had to slide it all off in one piece, and I plan on reselling this, which is why I did that. But, if you don't care, you just want to dremel the damn thing off or angle grind it, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to keep it in place, this is what you can do. So I'm putting this jack back in place underneath here. Now, this is a little odd because I'm showing these on. I had actually removed them off. It's a lot easier to physically take these off, I guess, earlier, and I probably should have said that, but you can still take them off now if they're not off. Just thumb screw this one off and then basically loosen this guy up. This jack here on the left-hand side, what I'm actually doing is I have the jack underneath, and I have it as far to the right as I can make it. All right, it's underneath the arm. It's not resting on the tire. It's underneath the arm, and it's as far to the right as I can make it. The one on this side is actually kind of lined up even a little bit over here, and I guess it depends on your individual jacks because some jacks have more surface area than others. But you got to remember, as you jack this bike up, what's going to happen is it's going to kind of want to lean and shift to the right a little bit, which means this piece here is going to kind of come up and shift to the right a little bit, and then conversely, this one here is going to want to kind of come up and shift to the right, which is why I want this jack as far to the right as possible. This is kind of what I look like from the back right now with the two jacks. You can see the angle that I kind of got on there. And I got it jacked up now. And, the goal is you want the tire off the ground, but you don't need it ridiculously far off the ground. As long as it's far enough to take it off, you're fine. So this is what I kind of look like from the side. As you can see, my tire is spinning freely. I just spun it by hand because it is actually off of the floor. What I'm not going to be able to show you in this video is actually the rear tire coming off and then the rear sprocket getting swapped. And that's because I actually had done this all already days earlier, and I didn't take any pictures or video of it. So we're going to have to kind of go through this, and you're going to imagine some things. So basically, the bolt on this side here and the bolt on this side here, they're basically there because there's a rod that goes straight through. And that keeps your rear tire on your rear piece here. So you got the swing arm, and you got the bolt and everything. And so that's kind of how everything's all held in place. You want to remove this bolt completely. You're going to remove this bolt completely. There's a bushing in here, so you want to be careful of that. The piece here that we thumb screwed, we want to make sure that's off. Then the piece that's on the back here with the two nuts, you want to make sure that's off because this tire, basically, at this point, is going to be coming off. You're also going to be taking the rear license plate off. And you might have to jack the thing up a little bit higher to give yourself some more room. But when you do that, basically, you know, the tire and the sprocket itself should be able to pop right off. And at that point, once you have the tire and the sprocket off of the bike, it's a matter of removing these 4 screws, which you can see here. They're in blue. I think they're 14 millimeter. I'm not really sure, but you're going to basically remove them, take the old sprocket off, put the new sprocket on, tighten them back up. You're going to put the tire back in, basically the same way that you took it off, but in reverse. And then you're going to want to start it by taking this rod, sliding this back through again, making sure that the spacer is in there, and any kind of bushings or anything that come out, you want to make sure they're back in. And then you basically put these nuts back up. You're going to tighten them back up. And then you can put this is the brake cable here. You're going to put that brake cable back on, and the other screw in the front, you can kind of tighten that up, which basically holds the rear drum brake tight to the frame. You can do that. This brake screw here, if you kind of keep an eye on where it was when you took it off, you can just kind of put it back on where it was before. And then when you put it back on, you know, use the front brake, depress it, make sure that your brake light comes on, you know, where you want it to. If it's too tight or too loose, you can just use this thumb screw to basically adjust that. This is the chain I'm using. It's a 520 primary drive chain. As you can see, it's 112 links long, and it's got the master link there. So this is the 17 tooth, as you can see here. It's got these 2 holes that we're going to be using to screw into on the front. So I slid that right on, and basically I slid this this one little piece on here. As you can see, when I was saying before, when it lines up, you want these 2 to line up with the 2 holes there, and the little grooves and everything on here. It's going to kind of sit in between that middle piece. There's like a slot that runs down in the middle there. It's going to slide right in. Yeah, you can see from this angle, just kind of sliding in between the slot. There's a little bit of play right now, or gap between this and this. But when you go to tighten this up, it's going to pull this sprocket right over. Now, I actually put a little bit of Loctite on here, blue, not red, because these are 2 bolts that I don't want coming out, and they weren't Loctited before. And just to let you know, when I first swapped these sprockets over, and I went to go take these off, one of my bolts was actually a little bit looser than I expected it to be. So I was a little bit upset. That was coming from the factory, so they didn't do a very good job of tightening it. So now that he's on, he's all tightened up. From here to here, I go from no chain to chain, all right? And the reason is, I basically took the new chain, and I was able to just put it right on. The new chain, because it's got the master link, is basically cut. So it's super easy. You just stick it right on the rear sprocket. You can kind of thread it right forward over the front sprocket and just kind of thread it all the way around. It's going to have a lot of slack on it, and that's perfectly fine. Don't worry about that right now. In the back, what I usually do, and what they recommend you do, is basically you can use the sprockets to basically help hold this chain like this. So I have the master link. Got my O-rings right there. And I've got the master link stuck through. I put the new O-rings on, and then basically, just like the diagram shows here, it's the O-rings, this plate, and then basically this guy inserted on this direction, because the chain's going to go, when the chain's driving this way, this is the way you want to install this, which is exactly the way I've got it here. It's clipped on, and then basically it's ready to go. And I actually put it straight up and down like this, because it's a lot easier with pliers to basically take it at that point and go boop, snap it right into place. As you can see, my nuts and everything are just still all loose, and I don't have anything tightened up here because I haven't done any adjustments. I've got a lot of slack on the chain, like I was saying. You can see that massive amount of slack, right? Not a problem, don't worry about it. So, we're going to use these 12mm nuts, and basically it's the front one, it's not the back one. The back one's just kind of like there to lock the front one in place. But as you tighten this nut up, what happens is it takes this whole piece and it pulls it backwards. So you're going to basically take this piece, it pulls it backwards. So the tighter this nut goes, the further back this slides, which makes the chain tighter and have less slack. And the amount of slack we're looking for is actually about 0.8 to 1.2 inches. And, you know, it's one of the things I didn't realize in the beginning is when they're asking about this, what they're actually saying is the total flop from the bottom of the chain here to the top of the chain, when you pop it up and down, should be about 0.8 to 1.2 inches. Now, what I actually did was I opted for it to be a little bit on the lower side, because as the chain ages, it's going to stretch a little bit and get bigger. Chains don't really get smaller as time goes on. They're going to get bigger, and as I'm going into the summer, it's going to expand and get larger as well. So I'm basically trying to adjust this so it's a little bit closer towards an inch, or the 0.8 inches. So you can see I've got my little ruler right now set up, and I'm at 8.5. And then basically when I measure to the top, I'm a little over 10, so I've got way too much slack on there. So basically the goal is, as you're adjusting this, there's these little slot things right here on the back. You can use them as guides, and they're on both sides. And as you tighten the one side up, tighten the other side up, you want the gap or the distance from like here to the end to be equal. All right, so you can kind of, if you got micrometers or something, you can measure it, or you can just eyeball it if you got good eyes. But it doesn't matter what number you're at. You just want whatever the distance is from here to here to be the same on the other side. So after some adjusting, what I actually decided to do, and I figured it'd be a smarter idea for me, is on my back plate, I just took a black marker and I made a couple of little marks on the back piece here, because it was easy for me to basically take a look at my chain slack and then mark it, and then I was able to measure it afterwards instead of trying to hold the ruler up. And then I just took a little bit of isopropyl rubbing alcohol and I took the marker off afterwards. But basically, when I first put this on, I made some adjustments. You can see I was at where the blue was, which was, you know, about 1.25 inches for the slack, which is a little bit large. So then I tightened it up a little bit more and ended up being at where the red is, which is about, probably I want to say about 0.9 inches, because this is 7/8 of an inch right here. So that's about 0.9. It's definitely under an inch. It's below 0.8 and an inch, which is good, which is exactly where I wanted it to be. With the chain being in the right spot, I snugged these up, this one here and the one on the other side, I snugged them up, but I didn't really go crazy. And then what I'm doing here is I'm actually using the jack stand on this side to help hold a wrench, as you can see. And I'm basically holding this so I can tighten this side up, and then this side won't spin freely while you do that, because what happens is you tighten the one side, it wants to spin the other, and it's kind of a pain. And you can sit there and hold this with one hand while you hold the other one, or, you know, and that can hurt your shoulders that way. This way works just as good. And I don't have a torque wrench, so I literally just eyeballed this. If you have a torque wrench, it's really the best way. You can torque it to the specifications based on the manufacturer, which I have no idea what they are. But you can see I got this tightened up, and again, like pretty snug enough where it's not really going to go anywhere, but not super tight where it's mainly on, like, again, super tight, because I still have to put the sprocket, the shock on the back, and finish some things up. I put this chain guard back on at the point right now because it's a lot easier to put the chain guard on when the spring's not in the way. And then basically at this point here, I put the top on, and I got the nut kind of tight, but like not enough, or I still slide this back and forth. As you can see, it's not lining up right. So I did the whole trick where I got the jack up under the front again to kind of lift up and take the pressure off. And then basically I did the jack up under the back piece here, and as I pushed this up, basically I was able to slide this right on without having to really force or hold the bike. I put this bolt back on there. You can't see that, but that's actually back on. Slid this piece back on. Again, it's this 5mm, 5mm, 5mm underneath there. Tighten that back up. You want to throw the shifter back on, and again, you want to kind of line it up to where it was before. I mean, there really is no right or wrong spot. It's not black and white. There's a lot of good spots, and well, obviously there is bad spots, but you want this angle here up to be comfortable, because as you're riding, you want to be able to easily put your foot under here, have it be able to shift up, so when you're changing gears, and obviously shift down, and then you want to make sure that this piece here doesn't hit this metal piece when you're shifting up, because you don't want anything to get in the way. It's really up to your personal preference, but slide this back on and then tighten this little bolt up there, and that's pretty much it. You've got your bike set up. What I did again is I further tightened those nuts up on the side, and as I tightened them, I kept checking my chain slack, because as you tighten these bolts on the side, sometimes you're going to get a little bit of movement, the tire going back and forth. It's going to happen, you know, especially if you're doing this the way I'm doing it with the jacks and everything. At this point, though, the bike is down, it's off the jacks, and I'm doing the fine-tuning with it on the ground, because it actually does say you can adjust the chain slack with the bike just on the side stand, which is perfectly fine. Some people will actually take a level or a piece or whatever on this back sprocket and attach it to the sprocket, and then basically have it point forward so you can check the chain to make sure it's aimed like right, because you don't want this back sprocket to be crooked. Like if this guy here is further forward than this guy, what's going to happen is your tire is going to be cocked to the side, and if that's cocked to the side, that means the sprocket's cocked to the side. And when that's the case, this sprocket actually will wobble kind of back and forth as the tire spins. With this up on the jacks, you can actually spin the tire to check to make sure the sprocket is not loose, or I'm sorry, if it's not out of center. And as long as it's, I mean, look, you just spin it by eye, man. As long as you don't see that thing flopping back and forth a ton, or even all, if you can't notice it's moving back and forth, you're gonna be fine. It's not rocket science. As long as it's pretty much straight. There's always slack in this the chain as far as the gap goes here, and then the sprockets are always designed so basically they always self-center. I mean, ideally, you don't want them riding on the side of these things, and it's going to eat up your sprockets. But, you know, sprockets they're going to wear, chains they're going to wear. Eventually, they're going to have to get changed over. So you're not going to get like 80,000 miles out of them no matter what you do. So for $40 whatever for each one, it's worth it to change them as they wear anyway. Oh, and real quick, I don't have any videos of like myself. Well, I have tons of videos of myself driving this bike before, and I guess you can go back and watch a couple of other videos of driving this. I don't have any after videos right now, but let me just tell you right now, night and day as far as the driving goes. Absolutely night and day. First gear is usable up until 20 miles an hour. Was never like that. I had to shift before 10 before. It was absolutely ridiculous. But now in first gear, I can actually take off, get a good amount of momentum up to like at least 20 before I have to shift to second. In second, I'm probably good until about 20 or 30 miles an hour. At that point, I shift into third, and I'm probably going up to about 40 miles an hour. I shift into fourth. In fourth gear, I can take it up to 50 if I really wanted to, 50, 55 miles an hour. The engine revs high, but honestly, in fifth gear before, you're revving high like crazy. It was ridiculous. Nowadays, I'm driving this thing. I don't shift into fifth gear until I'm doing like 50 or 55. And at that point, then it just settles itself down on a nice little RPM. And it is just a happy little bike, man. I gotta say, this 1740 swap is good. I know some people say they swap the 1738, and I can see that being good also. Especially if you're doing a lot of fast highway driving, like 75, 80 miles an hour. But honestly, me riding this bike, I don't take a 250 on the highway doing 75, 80 miles an hour. I'll cruise at 55, 60 maybe, and a 1740 gearing ratio is really good for that. I could still do 75 if I wanted to, and my engine RPMs would still be way lower than where it was before. But I got to say, the ratio, I'm happy with the 1740. I could throw somebody on the back, and I have before with the new gears, and I've had no issues with the pickup and the acceleration on it, and I don't feel like there's going to be any issue with the clutch getting burnt or anything like that. I really do recommend this swap if you got this bike. I mean, just to give you an idea, there's some websites here with some information. A gentleman here basically had the 1645, and I guess that's the stock gearing is 1645. Basically, 55 miles an hour, you're pushing, 5,400 RPM, which is, kind of on the high side. At least it sounds high for this V-twin. You start hitting higher than that, especially like 60 miles an hour and 65, and you really start screaming with this bike. But, doing a swap to 1738, which is a little bit more of a gearing than basically what I swapped to. Basically, he was able to drop it all the way down to 4,300 at 55 miles an hour. And then basically looking at this other website here, basically swapping to 1740, which is what I've got, basically doing 55 miles an hour. Basically, it looks like it's about 4,800 RPM, which is healthy, man. It's good. It just sounds so much better, and tons of power, like more power than you need. I'm about $155 right now. The bike's perfect for me. I couldn't ask for anything better. So that's it for the video. Hopefully it was educational and informative, and I probably rambled way too much and made it way too long, but you know what? Too much information is never a bad thing. This is Quarantine Monger signing out. Catch you on the flip side.